I'm Andy,
I'm Drew.
and this is Spork.
Spork. This week on Spork, I feel like we've been, say, unfair to Tom Brady here in recent weeks, taking a lot of championships away. So this week, maybe we're going to give him another one. Why not? Right?
Yeah, I think it's only fair to kind of reset the balance.
Yeah. So we are looking at his first retirement in 2022 that lasted all of, I think,
40
3
days?
weeks. Yeah, okay. So almost 6 weeks. And to really, I guess, set the backstage here for the potential move to make everything go the way that we want it to for our own narrative. Let's go back to 2019, where the head coach of the Miami Dolphins was meeting with the owner of the Dolphins. So Brian Flores was the coach at the time. Was meeting with Stephen Ross, and allegedly Tom Brady came to meet with them on the yacht that was owned by the Dolphins owner, allegedly, and began almost the, courtship, trying to get him to sign there, maybe instead of Tampa Bay at the time in 2020, where Brady would go on to win. And, there was also a ownership stake that had been floated out, which, subsequently you can tell that was a strong interest of Brady's given what he's done with the Raiders. So, kind of fast forwarding a couple years, Brian Flores came from the Patriots, but didn't really pan out through 2022. And, they had Tua there for, I think he had been there for 2 seasons at that point, and just wasn't seeing eye to eye with the Dolphins front office, and they parted ways. And at that time, found Payton in the 2022 offseason, where Tom Brady had retired for a short period of time, also stepped away from the New Orleans Saints. And there were some, undercurrents that maybe there was a marriage to be made in Miami between Sean Payton and Tom Brady, who coincidentally, I believe, based on very surface level research that I've done, had the same agent.
Interesting.
Yeah. So with that in mind, they both signed there in 2022 in our hypothetical timeline, instead of what actually played out, which was Tom Brady's last NFL season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, we got a lot of different things here at play, because it's probably I assume he's not going to be there just for 1 year. So it's probably a 2-year stint. And he's probably, so that's extending his career an extra year. Sean Payton never goes to the Broncos. And then we have a lot of player fallout that we need to get into. And then also the coaches, because now Mike McDaniel, that is, doesn't end up coaching to what happens with Tyreek Hill. So there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, and I would say, I've listened to a lot of sports hypotheticals, right? And especially around contracts and the salary caps and whatnot. This is where it got really kind of difficult. I totally underestimated, how the amount of time and research, that people would have to go into to really put that together. I guess that's why there's experts on the subject.
Yeah, no, I'm thankful that there are, because, we don't have the time to do that. But
yeah.
So, there were some, I'll say, where some of the stories kind of leaked out regarding the Dolphins' overtures to Miami were, a lawsuit stemming from Brian Flores with the NFL. And a lot of things came out of that following his treatment during some of the interview processes that he went through. But, they drafted Tua in 2020, and I want to say their seasons they weren't awful. They were so he went 6-3 as in 2020, not starting all their games, and then 13-12. Oh, sorry, he played 12 of 13 games, but was 7-5 in 2021, and then was 8-5 in 2022. So it's not like Tua had the best start, but he does have one of the most valuable things in the NFL, which you're kind of hitting on, which is a rookie and quarterback contract. Whenever you have a capable quarterback early in their career on their first or second contract, usually that's pretty advantageous for you to build around them.
And with that, it's the big thing, knowing that he's on a rookie deal and all this stuff is going on in the background. Now, granted, it started before he was drafted, but it kind of points to the perceived value of Tom Brady at this point, that they would forego, a rookie contract with a serviceable quarterback to go after Tom Brady, who was 44, 45 at the time.
He was 45 in 2022.
Okay.
So, yeah, and it's not like, from a achievement standpoint, they were the 7th seed in 2022, which is the season that would basically not be his, and they lost to Buffalo by 3 in the playoffs, who was the 2nd seed, and then would go on to lose to Cincinnati, who lost to Kansas City, who beat Philadelphia in the first of their Super Bowl matchups. But, the other thing taking him out of this is, I guess if you want to start with Tua, we'll start there and then kind of work our way through.
Yeah, start with Tua.
So one of the things that I think would really help him is 2022, I think he had quite a few concussions. So if he stays behind Brady, potentially, that's something where he's saving a lot, and there's no way to say that hasn't impacted his career. I think most people would agree to that.
I think that's probably been the key to some more rapid regression over the past couple of years, specifically.
Yeah, and I mean, he had, trying to see, so he was actually taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center following the game with the Bengals in week 4. No, was discharged and then returned to practice. I think he was inactive for basically 2 weeks and then returned in week 7. So that was week 4 to week 7. And then he had another concussion on Christmas, basically. So that's 2 concussions within, say, 3 months. So if you get those out of there and you throw in, because Brady's a short-term rental, right? I mean, he's not going to be there for 5 years. And if you can sell a guy, I know you are competitive and, you've done everything to the highest level at every team you've been on, but sit behind Tom Brady and learn, I mean, that would, if he could get on board for that, it'd probably be invaluable, right? To where his career could be today. And if you think about, Sean Payton being there instead of Mike McDaniel, now that's not to say McDaniel didn't have kind of the splash as he entered in down there in Miami with some pretty innovative offenses, but you throw in more of a veteran coaching presence like Sean Payton, and that's somebody that maybe isn't taking as many risks, trying to wait for longer routes. It's more of the Drew Brees style, where it's getting rid of passes shorter and, almost prolonging or protecting the quarterback, really.
Yeah. And when you think about the style too, that was the big thing that I was taken away from Tua being part of the Sean Payton offense, is that Tua did adapt a style in Miami that I don't know was necessarily his game, right? Like he had two very quick receivers. It made sense to take advantage of that, but then when you kind of look at his build and you look at his arm strength and all these like intangibles and whatnot, he kind of fits that more of a Sean Payton type style than he does maybe a Mike McDaniel style.
Yeah, I agree, and I think for the purposes of this hypothetical exercise, I think Tyreek Hill still ends up in Miami. I don't know that if we unwind that and talk about who goes where and what happens, I think that's probably beyond
tough. That would be tough. Yeah.
There's a lot more threads there. So we keep that there. And I don't think that Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill would be hamstrung by a different type of offense. I think their usage rate would be different. But if anything, their number of catches probably increase by some percentage. Just in
there's even the yak, yards after catch, and Tyreek Hill, I don't know what the exact number was, but I don't think he's much of a slouch when it comes to that stat. He was faster than the majority of people on the field. When he slipped a defender, he was gone. So I think there's that part of it is still
and I think the one thing that would be missing that's kind of been a hallmark of especially later Brady's career was the tight end, right? I don't know that those Miami teams really had that same big presence the way Gronkowski was in Tampa or
had
New England.
They have what? Mike Gillespie? Gesicki, that's what it was. Sorry. He even played for the Bengals, and I can't even say the name right.
But
I want to say he was on one of those teams, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so he was there in 2022 and then went to the Patriots in 23 for a year before ending up.
So I guess in this scenario, right, you're saying all this goes down, Tua stays.
I think so.
Takes his okay.
Well, so
I can see it.
The alternative is he's traded, right? And
right.
You look at the 2022 draft. That's probably the easiest way to look at who would have been taking a quarterback and thinking about it, right? Hold on.
Probably Tampa Bay if they're getting rid of one, right?
Yeah, so Tampa Bay would have been, they don't have Baker yet. So they have Jameis, I think, still.
Yeah, Jameis, I believe, was on that roster.
And Blaine Gabbert. And so in the 2022 draft, there were a total of, when do you think the first quarterback was taken?
Oh, was this a bad, like the bad year?
This was the bad quarterback draft.
Oh gosh, was it like late in the second round? Maybe?
No, it was still first round.
Oh, was it?
So it was Kenny Pickett went first he went 20th to the Steelers.
That's right. Wasn't my gosh, I'm totally blanking here, but
They go Will Levis. Oh, is he in this one? No.
Oh gosh, I feel like the guy from was it Liberty?
Oh, Malik.
No,
I don't think he's in this one.
Okay.
Desmond Ridder was a second quarterback taken in the late third round to the Atlanta Falcons. Oh, Malik Willis from Liberty. Yeah. Third round also, Tennessee Titans.
Okay. So that's the one that stood out to me. And
Matt Corral from Ole Miss in the third round.
Yep. Yeah.
And Bailey Zappi in the fourth round to New England Patriots from Western Kentucky. Maybe they do a little something.
Right. I think in some of the scenarios that I was coming up with is that it was that in some way, somehow, Tua is packaged up in however Brady or Sean Payton are acquired. But
yeah, I mean, who did the Saints have at the time?
Was that
it's
Teddy backup?
No, actually, they're starting quarterbacks in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston. So
okay, so that's where Jameis was.
Yeah,
gotcha.
And Taysom Hill, always spelling in there. So this must have been before they got Derek Carr. They got him the next year.
So, I mean, it is realistic that Tua would be on that roster.
Yeah.
As a starter. I mean, yeah, as much as I think Jameis maybe gets like a bad rap because he's a little bit more old school with the turnovers.
That would be an interesting quarterback room. Jameis, Andy Dalton, and Tua.
Yeah, I definitely think one of those guys is out the door.
It's almost like, but then you look at what the Giants had this past year with Russell Wilson, Jameis, and Jackson Dart. I mean, it probably...
Yeah, it's true. Maybe just a few years before it's time.
Yeah.
With this, theoretically 3-starter-ish quarterbacks. I would call them like good backups.
Yeah.
At this point in their careers. But yeah. So I think it's, as we kind of wrap up like the Tua side of it, there's definitely two paths. I think if they can find a way to keep him on Miami's roster, that helps Miami for when all this eventually comes to a head, when Tom Brady retires and they have nothing that they can draft because they've given all their picks away for Sean Payton and Tom Brady.
Yeah. No, and they had to get Payton. The Saints did end up having to trade a 3rd-round pick and a 2nd-round pick in the next 2 drafts. And the Saints sent the rights to Sean Payton and a 3rd-round pick 2 years later. So that was, I think if you flip Tua in instead of maybe that 1st-round pick, maybe that's what does it. But to be honest, I think him staying and what happened in Miami is probably the worst case out of these outcomes for Tua. I think depending on what, maybe they don't have the same success in New Orleans, but, I think you look at the running game they had down there with Kamara and, you got Taysom Hill and, just some other interesting caveats in that offense, not to mention Olave, and I think they still have Brandon Thomas at the time.
Mike,
I don't know. I've lost all the Saints, but so they, so I think it would have been an interesting fit, and I think maybe a little more well balanced than the pass heavy, everything's on Tua Miami offense that he kind of found himself in with the Mike McDaniel schemes.
Right.
So I think moving on to how everything plays out for Payton and Brady, which is, not Payton, but Sean Payton.
Not that exactly. Yeah. A instead of E.
Yep. So, I think what makes sense to me about this move and why Tom Brady would do it, aside from financial considerations, if he does get part ownership as part of it or gets the buy-in, however that's structured. I think because you've seen how he's a little petty, right, with the Patriots when they were starting to get success without him. I think he would have relished the opportunity to be in that division and go up there, play in New England, and beat Belichick.
Yeah.
And, and I think, not to mention the Jets and Bill's history, to have some of that, I mean, at this time and still, Josh Allen is in theory, kind of the king of the division, but, that hasn't really translated beyond the regular season too much. So I think it almost upends the hierarchy there.
It does, definitely short term. It does.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about what Brady did at 45 in that last season he played in Tampa. I mean, he still had he threw the most pass attempts he had in his entire career. So he was at 733 pass attempts, 67% completion, which is, upper half of his career. and 4,600 yards, 25 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. You know, he's not, the year before he had 5,300 yards and 43 touchdowns. So it's not like he's not managing the game, right? He's forcing the game and impacting it for better or worse.
Yeah, and I don't want it to be like understated either. Like in this scenario, he's not moving very far away from where he was, and it's a warm climate. Like at the end of the day, Miami gets a lot of criticism maybe because they play in this warm climate and there's this persona or whatever with them that they're, that's a little bit of their secret sauce to their speed and whatnot. But it's like, that's going to add to his longevity as a player. If half of his games are in 80-degree weather and all, I think there's something there. There's probably a little bit of a decline just year over year, but with him personally, but I think I think Miami is overall statistically better with him as the quarterback just because of his decision making. With those kind of weapons, they're arguably the best weapons he's had. Aside from like the Randy Moss years and having Mike Evans, like to have two incredible receivers and
it's almost like the best versions of Wes Welker that he ever had.
Exactly. %. So I mean he's gonna put up the numbers. I think Miami can put up the wins. Sean Payton, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and I was looking at Breeze's stats, kind of the last couple of years in New Orleans. And, I mean, he didn't play all the games in 2019 or 2020, but, he still was throwing for, say 3,000 yards on 10, 11, 12 games, 75% completion percentage, 27-ish touchdowns, 5 interceptions on average those last 2 years. And he's 40 and 41, but you got to think that Brady at 45 and 46 is probably equivalent to Breeze at 41, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know like how many hits they took or whatever, but I mean, Brady's even just having a bigger frame, probably absorbed hits a little bit better. That's just theoretical, but
yeah. No, and at this point, I think Sean Payton and Drew Brees through then, their system is almost like the Patriot system, right? Where they grew together and were almost coexisting. So you couldn't really have one without the other. So maybe there's a little bit of time to build up to that with Brady, where you have this coach and this quarterback who have done everything and, kind of at odds, but you look at what Brady was able to do in his first season in Tampa, and he's adaptable, right?
yes.
So
they're definitely prolific. I think really like the big question with this team is how far can they go?
Yeah, so that's where you start looking at the other teams that season, and I mean, so say they end up, I guess you can say wherever they are. The actual Dolphins end up 7th at 9-8. If you say Brady gets them 2 more wins, the Bills were still 13-3 that season, so they're still in the wild card, which I don't think they're overcoming that Bills team, right?
Yeah.
So they're still in the wild card, but if they move up, they're likely playing the Jaguars, who won their division at 9-8, and then after that, they go straight to Kansas City, and that's the make or break game. Tough.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the classic passing of the torch game, right? And you have to know like Brady knows that.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna play differently. He's so ultra competitive that I couldn't see him ever going into a passing of the torch game and being like, "Yep, I'm ready to." It's like he's gonna show that he's still the best.
Yeah, I mean, you think of what they did to the all those AFC championship games and what they did to them in the Super Bowl, right? Like leading up to that.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that who they played? Yeah, it was the Tampa Bay versus the Chiefs, and it was what's the final score of that? 31-9. So maybe he's got a little secret sauce that he
Yeah.
can play mind games, and then he ends up in a matchup that would end up being a home game AFC championship for the Cincinnati Bengals 1 year after being knocked out of the Super Bowl by the Rams. And I don't think there's any chance that Bengals team can beat.
No.
There's too much. I mean, they only lost by 3 to the Chiefs, but I think at that point the stage would be too big for there'd be too much of a circus surrounding the Brady extravaganza, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think that they win a Super Bowl. I mean, I guess it's always possible, right? But
yeah,
with
I assume you're saying the Miami Dolphins, not the
Dolphins,
Bengals, because you said it's possible to win a Super Bowl. Everybody knows Cincinnati can't.
Yeah. I mean, we'll probably get into that in a later date, but yeah, it's more like with Brady, he showed that he could do it with Tampa, which is amazing. Join a new team, win a Super Bowl. It's like that's awesome. But to like triple down or whatever you want to call it, and do it again. Like I don't even know if Brady can do that quickly.
Yeah,
and I think the stats would be amazing. It's gonna be I think that's my favorite part of all of these. It's just like knowing how statistically these things can play out. Record numbers aside, you still have to put it all together. They're going to have to give up a lot to make this happen. I think the defense probably suffers a little bit as a result, and ultimately they're not going to outscore everybody.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think the 2 Super Bowls in these hypothetical 2 seasons probably play out the same between the Chiefs and the Eagles, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to imagine 46-year-old Brady really turning the tide. Now, I think the regular season is probably where he's able to make his mark, like you're saying, kind of impact the record books and really just put everything even further out of reach,
Right.
having another season. But yeah, I think it would have been great TV, though.
Yeah. I mean, this could have rivaled the 50 touchdown season he had.
Yeah.
I truly believe that with those kind of weapons. And I know we kind of said we weren't going to get too far into how they got there and how they kept this team, but I still think it's very realistic that this roster could have been constructed in this hypothetical with all these weapons.
Yeah.
If they played it right, depending on how Brady was valued at the time, I know Tampa said they wouldn't give him up for any less than 5 first rounders, but we know that's not true. For a 45-year-old quarterback. So I could see this definitely playing out with this kind of roster. And so it's kind of fun to think about, okay, this is the tip top of what they could be. And I still don't see them winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah. No, and I was looking at trying to find just an angle, and it's hard, because either way, he's got to go to Kansas City in either of those playoffs, and it's going to be single digits probably. And like you mentioned, if it's hot, they have an advantage, but when it gets colder, that advantage is, kind of softened. And I just don't think they can get the wins in the regular season to, get that 1 or 2 seed to really propel them up to have that advantage throughout late January. So
yeah, for sure.
And I was looking at the stats, and you look at what he has over the next person and some of the biggest numbers. Like he's got 9,000 yards over Drew Brees. The next And then behind him is Peyton Manning, who's 17,000 yards behind him.
Oh my gosh.
Brett Favre, 17,000. Aaron Rodgers is 23,000. So, it's not even close.
No, I mean, being great over a long period of time.
Yeah.
Definitely wins when it comes to that.
Breeze is second in touchdowns. Do you know how close he is?
50.
70.
Whew.
Well, actually 78, but
Even worse.
110. Yeah, I mean, it's just the sheer lead he has is crazy. And you look at, because he did play so many years, his passing yards per game, he's 8th. So at 266. So, it did drop off there. And, those first few seasons, he wasn't throwing the ball 50 times a game. I think it was more like a 25 time a game type performance for those first, 5-10 years. Really until they got Randy Moss, it felt like. So, yeah, I think all those just end up being so much more out of reach at that point. And maybe not so much more. You're probably adding, 25, 30 touchdowns and another 3,000 to 4,000 yards. It's hard to think about putting a guy that's already in his own class just pushing that class up a little further. But I feel like that's what would have happened. Make the untouchable that much more. It's almost like, you look at some of those Gretzky records where there's just the gap between 1 and 2 are just crazy, and would be bordering on that.
Yeah, exactly. And not to divert too much, but I was going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here where, I keep thinking of this inevitable reset that Miami would end up doing after Brady left. I'm going to assume that Sean Payton stays around.
Yeah.
After Brady leaves, but just looking at like the quarterbacks that would be coming up in the draft, and you have to kind of think like if this team was as good as what we think that they're going to be, I think this would be.
So, and you're assuming they take a
quarterback.
And Brady stays 2 years, right? So he plays in 2022 and 2023. So you're looking at the 24 draft.
Yeah, and that was the draft with like Caleb. If I'm thinking about right, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May.
Yeah,
and they're all gonna go.
Yeah, so
1, 2, 3. So you kind of like go down. It's like JJ McCarthy was number 10, and then Bo Nix was 12. And there's probably a scenario where if they could clean together enough picks or players that they could move up. But it would be really funny if Bo Nix ended up with Miami.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah.
It's like, Sean Payton still gets his guy. It's amazing to think like all this could play out. And still the only thing that might change is just the location of where he goes. But he's playing with the same Bo Nix. I mean, is playing the same coach, a similar system, and just a way different climate.
Yeah, and you got to think that it's almost a better situation, you would think, going into Miami for Bo Nix at that point as a rookie where, they've been building a contender for Brady. So he's walking into a system that's ready. I mean, he had a pretty good college career, and I think, I don't know that he necessarily hit the ground running right away in Denver by any stretch, but, I think if that infrastructure's there, Peyton's been there 2 years instead of 1 year as what really happened, everything's kind of in motion. Maybe it is a little smoother transition and almost becomes a accelerated timeline for him, right?
Yeah,
and maybe he's the guy we're talking about instead of Drake May this year,
right? I mean, if he didn't get hurt, he very well could have been, playing in the Super Bowl this year. So I think it could very well play out the same way if he would have gone to Miami to play with Sean Payton. I just thought that's an interesting wrinkle to all this, is that like I said, all this could go down, and yet things can kind of stay the same.
Yeah, and it is funny how certain types of coaches go after certain types of quarterbacks. And yeah, I feel like Sean Payton's one of those guys where that's his guy, Bo Nick. So he's probably trading around to get up to that spot, or, very heavily got a pulse on the situation of where he needs to be to make sure. Because if Brady really is leaving and they don't have a backup in place from the previous season or two, that's priority one.
Exactly.
So outside of that, what did we miss? Anything?
No, we covered a lot of it, and honestly, it's probably best that we don't get into the money, because who knows if I use my calculator right. So
there's a lot of zeros.
There's a lot of zeros, and some days it's like, let's just let it ride.
Well, and you gotta think. I assume you're talking about Brady's contract at this point, right?
Oh, Brady's contract, and the next steps.
If he's getting ownership, you gotta think that's a different type of structured contract.
Yes.
So, that's one of those things where it's got to be. I don't know how they work that in without going afoul of any union regulations that are in place through the NFLPA, but I'm sure if there is a way, they would have found it. So
yeah, I was gonna say somebody way smarter than me is gonna figure that out.
So all right, I will say I think there was just one little tidbit that I had at the end, was that there was a little Belichick twist to this, where, and this is all something I read on as part of the Brian Flores lawsuit, but I guess Belichick had texted him something about getting the Giants job that he hadn't even interviewed for. And, he said he meant to text a different Brian Dabble, but, and there's apparently a conspiracy theory about them just, getting, or the lawsuit was that they were only interviewing Brian Flores to meet their minority criteria. But the flip side of it is, I guess there's some conspiracy theorists that say that Belichick knew about it and was trying to get the whole situation to blow up. The chances of Brady going to the Dolphins and just trying to sabotage Brady's career even more, knowing that, Flores had been let go. So just trying to blow that up, which, I think that's 4 or 5 dimensional chess, I feel like, at that point, instead of what we've seen from Belichick and, in subsequent years of, maybe he's not as mentally sharp, being a 75-year-old. I'm sure he's still smarter than me at this point, but I could see him fat fingering a text to the wrong Brian. Like,
I can see it either way, but it is an interesting thing, because when you said Belichick, the first thing I was thinking is, if Belichick finds a way to beat Brady and Sean Payton, does he still have a job in New England?
Yeah.
Or at least he has the last laugh. I'm not sure, but it's the last laugh.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I think we covered everything there.
We got it all.
All right. See y'all next time. And that's a wrap for today. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share, and be sure to tune in next time.